Cops laughed as I bled out, thinking I was worthless. But I was an undercover prosecutor. The taste of copper filled my mouth as I pressed my face against the cold asphalt, watching my blood pool around the broken glass from Officer Martinez's smashed radio. 23 minutes. That's how long I'd been lying here while they stood in a circle, placing bets on whether I'd make it to the hospital. $5 says the junkie's out in 10, Detective Brooks laughed, flicking ash from his cigarette onto my outstretched hand. Look at all that blood. Damn shame when trash like this wastes our time. I wanted to tell them exactly what I thought of their betting pool. I wanted to flash my prosecutor's badge and watch their faces drain of color. Instead, I focused on breathing and memorizing every word for the recording device hidden in my jacket's lining, assuming it survived the 3 kicks to my ribs. Nah, she's tougher than she looks, Officer Martinez countered, checking his watch. These street rats always are. Give her another 15 before she croaks. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah Chen, assistant district attorney for the past 4 years, honor roll student at Stanford Law, lying in an alley while cops debated her life expectancy. For 6 months, I'd been Detective Sarah Kim, complete with fake arrest records and a carefully constructed backstory of petty theft and possession charges. The undercover operation had taken 2 years to plan, and I'd volunteered the moment Internal Affairs mentioned the 47th precinct. My ribs screamed with each shallow breath. The staged arrest had gone sideways when Officer Hendricks decided to add some authenticity by slamming me face first into the brick wall behind Chen's Market. What should have been a simple takedown turned into something that required actual medical attention these bastards seemed determined to deny me. You think she's got any family? Hendricks asked, crouching down to rifle through my pockets. His hands found the burner phone and threw it against the wall. Someone should probably call them. Tell them their little princess ain't coming home for dinner. If only he knew. My real phone sat in a safety deposit box across town, along with photos, audio recordings, and detailed notes about every dirty deal I'd witnessed. 6 months of documentation that would put half this precinct behind bars. The other half would lose their badges and pensions. But right now, all that evidence meant nothing if I bled out in this alley. Martinez, radio for that bus again, Brooks finally said, though his tone suggested he was only going through the motions. Make sure they know it's no rush. Just another tweaker who got a little rough with the wrong people. The ambulance call had supposedly been made 37 minutes ago. In reality, I'd watched Martinez pretend to key his radio while actually switching it off. Standard procedure for the 47th when dealing with people they considered disposable. My vision started to blur at the edges, but I forced myself to stay conscious. I had to remember every detail, every cruel laugh, every moment they chose to let me suffer. Not just for the case I was building, but for Danny. My little brother's death certificate listed accidental injury during processing as cause of death. 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days ago, Danny Chen had been beaten to death in a holding cell right here at the 47th. The official investigation found no wrongdoing. Now I knew why. Brooks took another drag of his cigarette and smiled down at me. Sweet dreams, princess. He had no idea I was about to become his worst nightmare. The sound of approaching sirens finally cut through the evening air, but Brooks just laughed and stubbed out his cigarette on the dumpster beside my head. About damn time. Though I'm betting they take their sweet time getting here too. He was right. I could hear the ambulance idling at the mouth of the alley, but no one was rushing toward me with medical equipment. Instead, I caught fragments of conversation between the paramedics and Officer Hendricks. Another frequent flyer, probably faking half of it, no insurance anyway. My body was shutting down, but my mind remained razor sharp. Every word, every delay, every callous decision was being burned into my memory. The recording device might not survive, but I would. I had to. Chen, you still with us? Martinez kicked my shoulder, rolling me slightly. Fresh pain exploded through my torso, and I couldn't suppress a groan. There we go. Still got some fight left. Chen. Even in my current state, hearing my real last name made my blood run colder than the October pavement. It was supposed to be Kim. Detective Sarah Kim. Had I blown my cover somehow? What did you call her? Brooks asked, frowning. Martinez shrugged. Kim, Chen, whatever. They all look the same to me. Just casual racism then, not a blown operation. I almost laughed at my relief. Almost. The paramedic who finally approached moved with deliberate slowness, his partner hanging back by the ambulance. I recognized him, Tommy Reeves, brother-in-law to Sergeant Morrison. Part of the extended family that kept the 47th's dirty business in-house. Well, Reeves said, setting his bag down but not opening it. If it isn't our favorite repeat customer. What happened this time, sweetheart? Fall down some stairs? Resisting arrest, Hendricks said. Got a little physical when we tried to process her. You know how these people get. These people. Like Danny had been one of these people when they'd beaten him unconscious in that cell. Like our parents had been these people when they'd come to identify his body and been told it was his own fault for mouthing off to officers. Reeves pulled on latex gloves with exaggerated care, checking his watch. Vitals look stable enough. Probably just needs a few stitches and a night to sleep it off. Stable. I was lying in a pool of my own blood with what felt like broken ribs and a possible concussion, and he was calling me stable. The same way they'd probably called Danny stable right up until his heart stopped. How long until we can book her? Brooks asked. Lieutenant's breathing down our necks about processing times. Give it a few hours, Reeves said, finally applying pressure to the worst of my head wounds. Let her get cleaned up, then she's all yours. A few hours. Not enough time for proper medical evaluation, just enough to patch me up and throw me into the same system that had killed my brother. The same holding cells, the same officers working the night shift. I'd studied the duty rosters obsessively during my investigation. Officer Craig Williams, who'd been working the night Danny died, was scheduled for tonight. So was Detective Ray Santos, who'd filed the report claiming Danny had fallen off his bunk. They had no idea who I really was, but they were about to make the same mistake twice. The only difference was that this time, I'd be ready for them. The ambulance doors finally closed behind me 47 minutes after I'd first hit the pavement. As we pulled away from the alley, I caught sight of Brooks and Martinez already heading back to their patrol car, probably eager to grab dinner and forget about the junkie they'd left bleeding in the alley. They'd remember me soon enough. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and broken promises. St. Mary's Emergency had a reputation for being where the 47th Precinct dumped their problems, a place where questions weren't asked and medical records had a habit of disappearing. I'd been awake for the past 20 minutes, but kept my eyes closed while listening to the conversation between Reeves and Dr. Patricia Vance. Their voices carried easily through the thin curtains surrounding my bed in the overcrowded ER. Standard cleanup job, Reeves was saying. 12 stitches, maybe 15. Nothing that'll keep her out of booking for long. Tommy, she's got signs of internal bleeding, Dr. Vance replied, her voice tight with frustration. I need to run a CT scan, check for. Doc, with all due respect, we both know what happens when you start ordering expensive tests on these cases. Administration gets cranky, insurance gets complicated, and everyone's night gets longer. I'd heard variations of this conversation before during my investigation. Dr. Vance was one of the good ones, a physician who'd been slowly pushed to the margins for asking too many questions about suspicious injuries. Her predecessor, Dr. James Liu, had been quietly transferred to a clinic in rural Montana after he demanded a full investigation into a patient who'd arrived with injuries consistent with severe beating. That patient had been Marcus Williams, a community organizer who'd been found dead in his cell 6 hours after Dr. Liu's transfer was announced. The bleeding appears to have stabilized, Dr. Vance said finally, defeat creeping into her voice. But I'm noting in the file that she needs follow-up care within 24 hours. You do what you gotta do, document. Through slitted eyes, I watched Reeves leave the room. Dr. Vance remained, checking my fore and adjusting the monitors. When she leaned over to examine the stitches on my forehead, I opened my eyes. How are you feeling? She asked quietly. Like I got hit by a truck driven by dirty cops, I whispered. Her hand paused on my wrist. What did you say? I studied her face carefully. In my 6 months undercover, I'd learned to read people quickly. Dr. Vance had kind eyes, but more importantly, she had angry eyes. The kind of anger that came from watching injustice happen and being powerless to stop it. The truck part or the dirty cops part? She glanced toward the door, then back at me. You need to be careful what you say in here. These walls have ears. I'm guessing they have cameras too. And I'm betting the footage from tonight will mysteriously malfunction, just like it did when Marcus Williams was here. The color drained from her face. How do you know that name? Before I could answer, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Dr. Vance quickly busied herself with my chart as Officer Williams appeared in the doorway. Craig Williams, the same Craig Williams who'd been on duty the night Danny died. He was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'8" with thinning hair and the soft build of someone who'd spent more time behind a desk than on the streets. But his eyes were cold, and I recognized the casual cruelty in his smile. How's our patient, Doc? He asked, stepping into the room without invitation. Stable, Dr. Vance replied curtly. But she needs rest. I'm sure she does. Williams approached my bed, his hand resting casually on his service weapon. You gave us quite a scare back there, Kim. For a minute, we thought you might not make it. The fake concern in his voice made my skin crawl. This was the same tone he'd probably used with my parents when they'd come to claim Danny's body. Sympathetic words wrapped around a complete lack of empathy. Lucky me, I managed to croak. Williams laughed. Yeah, lucky you. Listen, soon as Doc here clears you, we're gonna have a nice long chat downtown. Got some questions about your association with certain unsavory characters in the neighborhood. He was fishing, trying to see how much I knew about their operations. The smart play was to act scared and confused. Instead, I found myself thinking about Danny's funeral, about my parents crying over a closed casket because the injuries had been too severe for an open viewing. Can't wait, I said. Williams pulled up a chair and settled in beside my bed like he had all the time in the world. Dr. Vance shot him a look that could have melted steel, but he ignored her completely. You know what's interesting about tonight? He said, leaning back in the chair. We got 3 different calls about suspicious activity at Chen's Market. 3 separate witnesses who saw you dealing near the dumpsters. I kept my expression neutral, but internally I was calculating. Chen's Market was controlled territory for Detective Santos's crew. They ran protection for the owner, skimmed from the register, and used the back alley for their own transactions. No legitimate witnesses would have called in anything, which meant Williams was testing me. Must have been someone else, I said. I was just walking by when your buddies decided to redecorate the alley with my face. Funny thing about that. Williams reached into his jacket and pulled out a small evidence bag containing a roll of bills. We found this in your jacket. Exactly $847. That's a lot of cash for someone with no job and 3 outstanding warrants. The money was real, part of my undercover allowance from internal affairs. But Williams had just made his first mistake. According to the report Martinez had filed an hour ago, they'd found $623 on me. I'd listened to him dictate it to dispatch while I was bleeding on the pavement. Maybe I'm better at saving than you think, I said. Dr. Vance cleared her throat. Officer Williams, my patient needs rest. You can continue this conversation once she's been properly treated. Doc, I appreciate your concern, but this is police business now. Williams never took his eyes off me. Besides, Kim here looks like she's feeling much better. Aren't you, Kim? The way he said my fake name made my skin crawl. There was something predatory in his voice, the same tone he'd probably used with Danny during those final hours. My brother had been 23, working 2 jobs to put himself through community college, when he'd made the mistake of filming Williams and Santos shaking down a convenience store owner. Danny's phone had never been found. The convenience store owner, Mr. Park, had suffered a sudden heart attack 2 weeks after Danny's death. Natural causes, according to the coroner's report. I'm feeling fantastic, I said. Nothing like a concussion and internal bleeding to really brighten your day. Williams smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You've got a smart mouth. I like that. Shows character. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. But smart mouths can get people into trouble around here. Accidents happen. People fall downstairs, slip in showers, choke on their dinner. Dr. Vance stepped between us. That's enough. I'm calling hospital security. No need, document. Williams stood up, straightening his uniform. I was just leaving anyway. But Kim, remember what I said about being careful. This neighborhood can be dangerous for people who don't watch where they're going. He headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Kim? That money we found? We're gonna have to run some tests on it. Check for fingerprints, maybe trace where it came from. Hope you kept your receipts. After he left, Dr. Vance immediately began checking my monitors, her hands shaking slightly. I've never seen him act like that before, she whispered. Usually he just processes the paperwork and leaves. I was wondering the same thing. Williams had been unusually aggressive, almost like he suspected something. In 6 months undercover, I'd been careful to maintain my cover, never giving anyone reason to doubt my identity as a small-time criminal. Unless someone had talked. The thought hit me like ice water. My handler at Internal Affairs was Lieutenant Rebecca Torres, a 20-year veteran with an impeccable reputation. But Torres reported to Captain Harold Dixon, who reported to Deputy Chief Marcus Webb. That was 3 people who knew my real identity, plus whatever administrative staff had processed my paperwork. And Captain Dixon's brother-in-law was Sergeant Morrison from the 47th Precinct. Dr. Vance, I said quietly, I need you to do something for me. Can you check what time Officer Williams arrived tonight? She frowned but pulled up something on her computer. According to the log, he got here at 9:23 p.m. Why? Williams had been scheduled to start his shift at 10 p.m. I'd memorized every duty roster for the past 3 months. He'd shown up 47 minutes early, right around the time the ambulance had been called. That wasn't a coincidence. One more thing, I said. Can you tell me who requested he be assigned to my case? Her fingers flew over the keyboard. After a moment, her face went pale. It says here the request came directly from Deputy Chief Webb's office at 8:15 p.m. 15 minutes before I'd even been arrested. My blood turned to ice. Webb had requested Williams for my case before I'd even been arrested. That meant someone had known exactly what was going to happen in that alley, possibly even orchestrated it. Dr. Vance must have seen something in my expression because she quickly minimized the screen. I shouldn't have shown you that, she whispered. Patient information systems aren't supposed to. Dr. Vance. I grabbed her wrist gently but firmly. How long have you been working here? 4 years. Why? In those 4 years, how many patients like me have you treated? People who came in beaten up after encounters with the 47th Precinct? She hesitated, glancing toward the door. I can't discuss other patients. Danny Chin. 3 years ago. Do you remember him? The name hit her like a physical blow. She stepped back from my bed, her face going white. How do you know about Danny? Because he was my brother. The words hung in the air between us like a confession. Dr. Vance stared at me for a long moment, her medical training warring with something deeper, recognition, maybe, or guilt. Your brother, she repeated slowly. But your name is Kim, not Chen. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm an assistant district attorney working undercover to investigate corruption in the 47th Precinct. I kept my voice barely above a whisper. And I think they just tried to kill me the same way they killed Danny. Dr. Vance sank into the chair Williams had vacated, her hands shaking. I knew something was wrong that night. Danny's injuries, they weren't consistent with a fall. Multiple impact sites, defensive wounds on his hands and forearms. But when I tried to document everything properly, I was told to keep it simple. Who told you that? Dr. Morrison. The previous chief of emergency medicine. Her voice was bitter. Funny coincidence, he got promoted to regional administrator right after Danny's case was closed. Another Morrison. The 47th Precinct was like a spider's web, with corrupt threads reaching into every corner of the city's infrastructure. What happened to Danny's medical records? Transferred to the district attorney's office per standard procedure. But. She paused, chewing her lower lip. I kept copies. Unofficial ones. I scan everything now, store it off-site. After what happened to Dr. Liu, I wasn't taking any chances. My heart started pounding so hard I was sure the monitors would give me away. You have Danny's real medical records? Photos, x-rays, my original notes before they were edited. Everything that proves he was beaten to death. She leaned forward, her voice urgent. But if they find out I have them, they won't. I was already formulating a plan. Can you access them remotely? Yes, but not from here. The system is monitored. She glanced at her watch. My shift ends at midnight. I could. Footsteps in the hallway cut her off. Dr. Vance immediately busied herself checking my phone while I closed my eyes and tried to look unconscious. Through barely cracked eyelids, I watched Detective Santos enter the room. Ray Santos was everything Williams wasn't, tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind of presence that filled a room. He'd been the primary investigator on Danny's case, the one who'd concluded that a healthy 23-year-old had somehow managed to beat himself to death in a locked cell. Doc, he said, his voice a low rumble. How's our patient doing? Stable. She'll need monitoring through the night, but... That's what I was afraid of. Santos moved to the foot of my bed, his bulk blocking out the harsh fluorescent lights. See, we got a problem. Turns out our friend here has some outstanding warrants in 3 different jurisdictions. Real serious stuff. This was news to me. My fake identity had been carefully constructed to avoid any major complications. What kind of warrants? Dr. Vance asked. Armed robbery in Queens, assault with a deadly weapon in the Bronx, and failure to appear on a federal trafficking charge. Santos was lying smoothly, but I caught the slight pause before federal. He was making it up as he went along. FBI wants her transferred to federal custody tonight. Dr. Vance straightened her shoulders. Absolutely not. This patient has a serious head injury and possible internal bleeding. Moving her could be fatal. Doc, I appreciate your medical opinion, but this is out of both our hands now. Santos pulled out his phone and showed her something on the screen. Federal Marshal is already en route. ETA 15 minutes. There was no Federal Marshal. Santos was planning to move me somewhere off the books, probably to finish what Williams and the others had started in that alley. The same playbook they'd used with Danny, create a paper trail that justified moving him to an isolated location where accidents could happen. I had maybe 10 minutes before Santos's fake marshal arrived. 10 minutes to figure out how to survive the night and get word to someone who could help. But who could I trust? Webb was compromised, possibly Torres too. For all I know, half of internal affairs was feeding information back to the 47th Drive. Vance was still arguing with Santos, but I could see the defeat in her posture. She'd lost this fight before with Danny, and she was losing it again with me. The system was designed to crush people like us, prosecutors who asked too many questions, doctors who documented inconvenient truths, witnesses who recorded things they weren't supposed to see. But this time was different. This time I had 6 months of evidence hidden away, waiting to burn down everyone who'd touched my brother's case. I just had to live long enough to use it. Santos stepped closer to my bed, and I caught the scent of his cologne mixed with something else, fear sweat. He was nervous, which meant this wasn't standard procedure, even by the 47th's twisted standards. Actually, Doc, there's been a change of plans, he said, checking his watch. Marshall's running late. Some paperwork issues. We're gonna transport her ourselves. Dr. Vance crossed her arms. I won't sign a discharge form. She needs at least 12 hours of observation. That's the beautiful thing about federal custody, Santos replied with a cold smile. We don't need your signature. Through my barely open eyes, I watched him pull out a set of restraints. Not the standard police-issue cuffs, these were heavy-duty transport shackles, the kind used for maximum security prisoners. Overkill for someone supposedly arrested on small-time drug charges. My mind raced through the possibilities. Santos could be planning to stage another accident during transport, or maybe they had a more permanent solution in mind. Either way, once I left this hospital, I'd disappear into the same black hole that had swallowed Danny. Detective Santos, Dr. Vance said, her voice taking on a formal tone, I'm required to inform you that any patient movement against medical advice must be documented with the hospital administration. I'll need to call. At 11:47 p.m.? Good luck finding anyone in administration. Santos began unwrapping the shackles. Besides, federal warrants trump hospital policy every time. He was right about the time. I'd been unconsciously tracking it through the sounds of the hospital around us. Shift change had happened 20 minutes ago, which meant skeleton crew until morning. Perfect timing for making someone disappear. Dr. Vance moved protectively closer to my bed. I'm calling hospital security. Go ahead. Ask for Marcus Webb Jr., he's tonight's head of security. Santos' smile widened at Dr. Vance's shocked expression. Yeah, that Webb. Small world, isn't it? Deputy Chief Webb's son was running hospital security. The corruption went even deeper than I'd imagined, tentacles reaching into every institution that might provide sanctuary for someone like me. Or like Danny. There's nowhere to run this time, Kim, Santos continued, clearly enjoying Dr. Vance's growing horror. No lawyers to call, no witnesses to protect you. Just you, me, and a nice long drive to figure out exactly what you think you know. What I think I know. That phrase confirmed my worst suspicions. They didn't just suspect I was more than a street criminal, they were actively trying to find out what I'd discovered during my investigation. Santos leaned over my bed, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for me. I know you're awake, sweetheart. Your breathing changed 5 minutes ago, and your heart rate spiked when I mentioned the federal warrants. I opened my eyes and met his gaze directly. Hello, Detective Santos. Fancy meeting you here. His hand instinctively moved to his service weapon. Well. The junkie's got some fight left in her after all. He glanced at Dr. Vance, who was backing toward the door. Doc, why don't you go grab us some coffee? This might take a while. I'm not leaving my patient. Actually, you are. Santos pulled out his phone and showed her the screen again. Because if you don't, I make one call and Dr. Patricia Vance gets investigated for prescription drug theft. Amazing how evidence just shows up sometimes. Dr. Vance's face crumpled. She looked at me with something like an apology, then headed for the door. But as she passed Santos, she did something unexpected. She pressed the red emergency button mounted on the wall. Immediately, alarms began blaring throughout the hospital. Santos spun around, cursing, as Dr. Vance bolted from the room. Code Blue, emergency room bed 7, her voice echoed over the intercom. All available personnel to emergency room bed 7. Santos grabbed my shoulder, his fingers digging into the fresh stitches. You little bitch. You planned this. Actually, that was all her, I said, genuinely surprised by Dr. Vance's quick thinking. But I like her style. The sound of running footsteps filled the hallway as medical staff responded to the Code Blue. Santos had maybe 30 seconds before the room would be flooded with witnesses, too many to intimidate or buy off. He made his choice quickly, producing a syringe from his jacket pocket. Sweet dreams, Kim. When you wake up, we're gonna have that nice long chat I promised you. The syringe gleamed under the fluorescent lights as Santos moved toward my foreline. I had maybe 5 seconds before whatever he was planning to inject would hit my bloodstream, and the sound of approaching footsteps meant his window was closing fast. Wait, I gasped, grabbing his wrist with more strength than he expected. You want to know what I found? About the Hendricks account? Santos froze, the syringe inches from my foreport. What did you say? Detective Michael Hendricks. Account number 477921118 at First National. The one with $127,000 in deposits over the past 18 months. I was gambling everything on intelligence I'd gathered 3 weeks ago, banking that Santos didn't know how much I'd uncovered about their money laundering operation. The color drained from his face. How the hell do you know about that? Because I know about all of them. Your account at Savings and Trust with the monthly deposits from Chen's Market. Williams's gambling debts that mysteriously disappeared last October. Brooks's new house in Westchester that cost 3 times his annual salary. Santos slowly lowered the syringe, his mind clearly racing. The footsteps in the hallway were getting closer, but he was too focused on damage control to care. You're not some street junkie, he said. Who are you really? Before I could answer, Dr. Vance burst back into the room followed by 2 other medical staff and a security guard I didn't recognize, thankfully not Webb Jr. Santos quickly pocketed the syringe and stepped back from my bed. False alarm, he announced loudly. Patient had a small seizure, but she's stable now. Dr. Vance shot him a look that could have melted titanium. I'll be the judge of that. She immediately began checking my vitals while the other staff looked confused. The security guard, a middle-aged black man with kind eyes, stepped forward. Ma'am, did you press the emergency button? Yes, Dr. Vance said firmly. This officer was attempting to move a critically injured patient against medical orders. Santos's jaw tightened. I already explained about the federal warrants, which you still haven't produced any paperwork for, the security guard interrupted. I'm Marcus Thompson, head of night security. And until I see proper documentation, this patient isn't going anywhere. Thompson, not Webb Jr. Either Santos had lied to intimidate Dr. Vance, or there had been a schedule change. Either way, I suddenly had an ally I hadn't expected. Mr. Thompson, I said weakly, could you please check Detective Santos's credentials? Something about this doesn't feel right. Santos's hand moved toward his weapon, but Thompson was already reaching for his radio. Dispatch, this is Thompson. I need verification on federal warrants for a Jane Kim, currently in ER bed 7. Belay that, Santos snapped. This is classified federal business. Then you won't mind waiting while I make a few calls, Thompson replied calmly. Hospital policy requires verification for all federal transfers. The radio crackled to life. Thompson, we show no federal warrants or transfer orders for any patient at your location. Santos's face went white, then red. He'd been caught in his lie, and now he had to decide whether to double down or retreat. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of my heart monitor. There seems to be some confusion, Santos said finally. I'll need to check with my supervisor about the paperwork delay. He headed for the door, then paused and looked directly at me. Don't go anywhere, Kim. We'll get this sorted out real soon. After he left, Dr. Vance sank into the bedside chair, her hands shaking. That was the most terrifying 15 minutes of my career. It's not over yet, I told her quietly. Santos will be back, probably with friends. We need to move fast. Thompson was still standing by the door, looking puzzled. Ma'am, I've been doing security for 12 years, and I've never seen anything like that. Federal transfers don't work the way that detective described. That's because he's not following federal procedure, I said. Mr. Thompson, how well do you know the other security staff here? Pretty well. We're a small team. His eyes narrowed. Why do you ask? Because Detective Santos mentioned someone named Webb Jr. said he was head of night security. Thompson's expression darkened. Marcus Webb Jr. got fired 3 months ago for falsifying reports. If someone told Santos he was still working here. He reached for his radio again. Dispatch, I need all available units to do a sweep of the hospital. We may have unauthorized personnel on the premises. My heart rate spiked as the pieces clicked together. Santos hadn't just lied about the federal warrants, he'd been operating on outdated information about hospital security. Someone had fed him intelligence that was 3 months old, which meant either his sources were sloppy, or this whole operation had been planned months in advance. Dr. Vance, I said urgently, those files you mentioned, Danny's real medical records. Where exactly are they stored? She glanced nervously at Thompson, who was coordinating the security sweep over his radio. Offsite storage facility on Grant Street. Unit 247. She lowered her voice. But why does that matter right now? Because if they've been planning this for months, they might already know about your files. We need to get there before. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in 30 seconds later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Through the crimson darkness, I could hear Thompson barking orders into his radio while Dr. Vance fumbled for her phone's flashlight. Dispatch, we have a complete power failure on floors 1 through 4, Thompson reported. I need maintenance and backup security immediately. But I knew this wasn't a coincidence. The 47th precinct had pulled the same trick during a warehouse raid I'd witnessed 2 months ago, cut the power to create chaos, then move in during the confusion. Standard operating procedure for making problems disappear. They're coming back, I whispered to Dr. Vance. Santos is using the blackout as cover. As if summoned by my words, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Not the quick pace of medical staff responding to an emergency, these were measured, deliberate steps of people who knew exactly where they were going. Thompson moved to the doorway, his hand resting on his radio. Stay calm, ladies. Emergency power will have the elevators locked down, so whoever's out there is limited to the stairwells. Mr. Thompson, I said urgently, you need to know something. My real name isn't Kim, it's Sarah Chen. I'm a prosecutor investigating police corruption, and those men are here to kill me. He spun around, his eyes wide in the red emergency lighting. You're what? Assistant District Attorney, Eastern District. Badge number 4471. The detective who was just here, Santos, he murdered my brother 3 years ago in a holding cell, and tonight he tried to finish what they started. Dr. Vance grabbed my arm. Sarah, if that's true, then we need to get you out of here now. Where exactly would we go? I gestured toward the window. We're on the 4th floor, the elevators are down, and they probably got the stairwells covered. Thompson was already moving, checking the hallway through the small window in the door. I count 3 figures, all wearing dark clothing. They're not hospital personnel. The footsteps were getting closer, accompanied now by the low murmur of voices. I caught fragments, room 7. And, no witnesses. Dr. Vance, I whispered, is there another way out of this wing? Service elevator at the east end, but it requires a medical key card to operate during emergency power. I have one, she said, pulling a card from her pocket. But we'd have to get past them to reach it. Thompson shook his head. Too risky. Better to hunker down and wait for backup. Your backup might be compromised, I told him. Detective Santos has contacts throughout the building. For all we know, some of your own security team is working with him. His face hardened. That's a serious accusation, ma'am. 3 months ago, how exactly did Marcus Webb Jr. get fired? What were those falsified reports about? Thompson hesitated, glancing toward the door where shadows moved in the hallway. He was caught altering incident reports involving police interactions. Made it look like everything was routine when patients complained about excessive force. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Webb Jr. had been scrubbing hospital records for the 47th precinct, probably for cases just like Danny's. When he got caught, they'd lost their inside man, which explained why they were being so sloppy tonight. Mr. Thompson, I need you to make a call, I said. Lieutenant Rebecca Torres, Internal Affairs, badge number 8834. Tell her Sarah Chen is blown and needs immediate extraction. Sarah, no, Dr. Vance interrupted. What if Torres is compromised too? You said Deputy Chief Webb requested Officer Williams before you were even arrested. She was right. Torres reported directly to Webb, and if Webb was dirty, then my handler could be feeding information straight back to the people trying to kill me. The voices in the hallway were getting closer. I could make out Santos's deep rumble and at least 2 other men. One sounded like Officer Martinez from the alley, but the third voice was unfamiliar. Change of plans, I whispered. Dr. Vance, I need you to get to that storage unit on Grant Street. If something happens to me tonight, those files are the only proof that Danny was murdered. I'm not leaving you here. Yes, you are. Because if we both die tonight, Santos and his crew walk away clean, and my brother's death means nothing. Thompson moved back from the door, his expression grim. They're right outside. 3 men, all armed. And ma'am, I hate to tell you this, but one of them is wearing a hospital security uniform. My blood ran cold. Which one? Tall guy, about 40, scar on his left cheek. Dr. Vance gasped. That's Jim Morrison. Marcus Webb Jr.'s replacement. She grabbed my hand. Sarah, if Morrison's with them, then hospital security is completely compromised. The door handle began to turn slowly. Thompson stepped back, reaching for his weapon, while Dr. Vance positioned herself between me and the door. In the red emergency lighting, with a steady beep of my heart monitor providing an ominous soundtrack, I realized we were trapped. No way out, no backup coming, and 3 armed men about to walk through that door. But I still had 1 card left to play. Dr. Vance, I whispered, remember what I told you about Detective Santos knowing things he shouldn't? About my investigation being compromised from the inside? She nodded, her eyes never leaving the door. When they come through that door, I want you to mention Lieutenant Torres by name. Say she's expecting a call from me in 20 minutes. Make them think Internal Affairs is actively monitoring my situation. Will that work? Maybe. Or it might get us all killed faster. The door handle stopped moving, as if whoever was on the other side had heard something. But right now, it's the only play we have. The door burst open. Santos stepped through the doorway with his weapon drawn, followed by Martinez and a tall man in a hospital security uniform who had to be Morrison. The emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red shadows, making their faces look demonic. Well, Santos said, his voice eerily calm. Looks like we got ourselves a little party here. Dr. Vance stepped forward, her voice surprisingly steady. Detective Santos, Lieutenant Torres from Internal Affairs is expecting a call from Sarah in 20 minutes. If she doesn't hear from her. Santos laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Torres? You mean the Lieutenant Torres who authorized this whole operation? Lady, you've been played harder than a rigged poker game. My stomach dropped. Torres wasn't just compromised, she was actively working with them. The entire Internal Affairs investigation had been a setup from the beginning, designed to flush out anyone asking questions about Danny's death. Rebecca Torres has been feeding us intelligence for 18 months, Santos continued, clearly enjoying the revelation. Every meeting, every piece of evidence, every safe house location. You really think we'd let some crusading prosecutor waltz into our precinct without knowing exactly who she was? Morrison stepped closer, his security badge catching the red light. Sarah Chan, Assistant District Attorney, badge number 4471. Stanford Law Review, graduated summa cum laude. Took the job in Eastern District specifically to investigate your brother's death. They knew everything. My entire identity, my motivation, probably even the location of my evidence cache. 6 months of careful undercover work, and I'd been walking into a trap every single day. The beautiful part, Martinez added with a grin, is that officially, Detective Sarah Kim died tonight from injuries sustained while resisting arrest. Tragic accident. Your real identity never existed in our paperwork. Thompson raised his weapon, but Morrison was faster. I wouldn't, Marcus. Your wife Linda works at Sacred Heart Elementary, doesn't she? Sweet little school. Real shame if something happened to their security systems. Thompson's hand trembled, but he slowly lowered his gun. Another family held hostage by the 47th Precinct's web of corruption. Dr. Vance was backing toward my bed, her face pale in the emergency lighting. What do you want? Simple, Santos said. We want to know exactly what evidence our little prosecutor gathered, where it's hidden, and who else might have copies. Then we want her to disappear permanently, just like her interfering brother. The casual way he mentioned Danny's murder made my vision blur with rage. You beat him to death because he filmed you shaking down Mr. Park. Danny was stupid, Santos replied. Smart enough to get video of us collecting our monthly fee, but too stupid to realize Mr. Park had been paying for protection for 3 years. Your brother thought he was exposing corruption, but he was really just threatening a businessman's insurance policy. Insurance policy? Martinez laughed. You think we were extorting Park? Hell no. His store was getting robbed twice a month before we started providing security. We cut that down to 0 incidents, and Park was happy to compensate us for services rendered. They were rewriting history, making themselves the heroes of Danny's story. But I'd seen the video footage. Danny had managed to upload 30 seconds to a cloud server before they'd caught him. Park hadn't looked grateful, he'd looked terrified. The problem, Santos continued, was that your brother couldn't leave well enough alone. Started following us around with that damn phone, documenting everything like he was some kind of investigative reporter. So you murdered him. We defended ourselves, Morrison corrected. Danny attacked Officer Williams during processing. Got violent, started throwing punches. Williams had no choice but to subdue him. Funny how Williams is 5'8" and Danny was 6'2", I shot back. Santos shrugged. Big guys fall hard. Sometimes they don't get back up. Dr. Vance made a small sound of disgust, and Santos turned his attention to her. Dr. Vance, you've been awfully quiet. Something you want to share about your patient care that night? Her chin lifted defiantly. I documented everything properly. Danny Chen was beaten to death, and no amount of falsified reports will change the medical evidence. About those medical records, Morrison said, pulling out his phone. Unit 247 at Grant Street Storage. Amazing how easy it is to get past those cheap locks. My heart stopped. They'd already found Danny's real medical files. Took us about 20 minutes to locate everything, Santos added. Dr. Vance, you really should invest in fireproof storage. Amazing how quickly paper burns. Dr. Vance's face crumbled. The last physical evidence of Danny's murder, the x-rays, photographs, and medical notes that proved he'd been beaten, had just gone up in smoke. Now then, Santos said, his weapon trained directly on my chest, let's talk about your investigation, Sarah. Starting with where you've hidden the evidence, and ending with you taking a nice long nap next to your brother. The emergency lighting flickered, casting dancing shadows across Santos's face as he waited for my answer. But something had been nagging at me since Morrison mentioned the storage unit. Dr. Vance had been too calm when they revealed they burned the files. You're lying, I said suddenly. About the storage unit. Santos's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Grant Street Storage doesn't have Unit 247. It only goes up to 180. I was gambling on a detail I'd noticed during reconnaissance 3 months ago, when I'd considered using the facility myself. Dr. Vance never told you the real location. Martinez stepped forward, raising his weapon toward Dr. Vance. Is that true, Doc? Dr. Vance's composure finally cracked, but not in the way they expected. She smiled, actually smiled, in the face of 3 armed men. Unit 247 at Grant Street Storage belongs to my ex-husband. Has for 5 years. Hope you enjoyed burning through his collection of vintage baseball cards. Santos's face went purple with rage. Where are the real files? Somewhere safe, she replied. Somewhere you'll never find them. Morrison grabbed her arm roughly. Lady, you better start talking, because... The lights came back on. The sudden flood of normal hospital lighting was blinding after 40 minutes of emergency power. All of us blinked and squinted, temporarily disoriented, but Thompson recovered first. Years of security training kicked in as he dove for the emergency call button. Code Silver, ER Bed 7, his voice boomed over the intercom. Armed intruders, immediate police response required. Santos spun toward him, but Thompson was already moving, using the bed as cover. Real police, not your dirty friends from the 47th. Morrison raised his weapon, but the sound of running footsteps in the hallway made him hesitate. Code Silver was serious business. It would bring every available security guard, plus SWAT if they were available. We need to move, Martinez said urgently. Place is gonna be crawling with cops in 5 minutes. But Santos wasn't ready to retreat. Not without answers. Sarah, you've got 30 seconds to tell me where your evidence is hidden, or Dr. Vance starts bleeding. He pressed his gun against Dr. Vance's temple, and I saw my own helplessness reflected in her terrified eyes. 6 months of investigation, all the careful documentation of corruption and murder, and it was going to end with another innocent person dying because of the Chin family. Okay, I said, raising my hands. Okay, I'll tell you. Just don't hurt her. Sarah, don't, Dr. Vance whispered, but Santos pressed the barrel harder against her head. Safety deposit box 1247 at First National Bank, downtown branch. Key is taped under the dashboard of a Honda Civic, license plate number BX7-429, parked in a long-term lot at JFK Airport. Santos studied my face, looking for signs of deception. That better not be another lie. It's not. Everything's there, photos, recordings, financial records, witness statements. Enough to put half the 47th precinct behind bars. I met his eyes directly. Including video footage of you and Williams beating my brother to death. That got his attention. Martinez and Morrison exchanged nervous glances, but Santos just smiled coldly. Video footage, huh? That's interesting, because we confiscated Danny's phone that night. Smashed it to pieces. Danny was smarter than you gave him credit for. He set up automatic cloud uploads. Every video he recorded went straight to an encrypted server. Another gamble, but Santos's expression told me I'd hit close to the truth. Funny thing about cloud storage, it's really hard to destroy. The footsteps in the hallway were getting closer, accompanied by radio chatter. Santos was running out of time, and we both knew it. Morrison, get to that bank, he ordered. Martinez, you're with me. We're taking both women as insurance. But as they moved toward us, Thompson stepped into view behind them, no longer hiding behind the bed. In his hands was something that made my heart soar with desperate hope, a small digital recording device. Gentlemen, he said calmly, everything you've said in the last 10 minutes has been recorded and transmitted to internal affairs. The real internal affairs, not your compromised contacts. Santos whirled around, his face a mask of rage and panic. You son of a bitch. Hospital security protocol, Thompson replied. All Code Silver situations are automatically recorded and transmitted to multiple agencies simultaneously. Can't be stopped or intercepted once it's initiated. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw real fear in Santos's eyes. The recording device in Thompson's hands might as well have been a bomb, judging by the panic that flashed across Santos's face. But his recovery was swift. 20 years of dirty policing had taught him how to adapt when operations went sideways. Doesn't matter what you recorded, he said, though sweat was beading on his forehead. 3 dead bodies and a tragic hospital shooting by a disturbed security guard. Morrison here will back up our story, won't you, Jim? Morrison nodded, but I caught the hesitation. He was security, not a killer, and the reality of what Santos was suggesting was clearly hitting him. Ray, maybe we should. Maybe you should shut up and do your job, Santos snapped. We're too deep to back out now. Dr. Vance was pressed against my hospital bed, her earlier defiance replaced by growing terror. The recording is already uploaded, she said desperately. Killing us won't change that. No, but it'll buy us time to disappear before anyone can act on it. Santos adjusted his grip on his weapon. Amazing how long it takes internal affairs to process anonymous tips. Sometimes takes weeks to verify authenticity. He was right, and we all knew it. Even with Thompson's recording, the bureaucracy would move slowly. Santos and his crew could be in Mexico before any arrest warrants were issued. The sound of approaching footsteps suddenly stopped. Through the open doorway, I could hear muffled voices and what sounded like laughter. Martinez frowned and stepped toward the hallway. That doesn't sound like SWAT. Because it's not, a familiar voice called from the corridor. It's just us. My blood turned to ice as Officer Williams appeared in the doorway, followed by Detective Brooks and 2 other officers I recognized from the 47th. They weren't responding to Thompson's code silver, they were part of the cleanup crew. Took you long enough, Santos said, some of his confidence returning. We've got a situation here that needs to be contained. Williams surveyed the room, his cold eyes taking in Thompson's recording device and Dr. Vance's terrified expression. Looks like our little undercover prosecutor has been busy making friends. The recording's already uploaded, Thompson repeated, but his voice had lost some of its earlier conviction. Brooks laughed, the same cruel sound I'd heard in the alley. Uploaded to who? Internal Affairs? The DA's office? Commissioner's office? He pulled out his phone and showed us the screen. Funny thing about city communication networks, they all route through the same central servers. Servers that can experience temporary malfunctions during power outages. My heart sank as the implication hit me. They hadn't just infiltrated the police department and hospital, they'd compromised the city's entire communication infrastructure. Thompson's recording had gone nowhere. You see, Sarah, Williams said, stepping closer to my bed, you made one critical mistake in your investigation. You assumed corruption was a bug in the system, when it's actually a feature. Dr. Vance grabbed my hand, her fingers ice cold. What does that mean? It means, Santos replied, that the system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. The 47th precinct doesn't just serve and protect. We serve and protect the right people, from the right people. Morrison moved to block the doorway while Martinez positioned himself near the window. They were sealing off all possible escape routes, preparing for what Santos had called containment. Your brother figured that out too late, Williams continued. Danny thought he could expose a few dirty cops taking kickbacks from convenience stores. He had no idea he was actually documenting a carefully managed economic ecosystem. Economic ecosystem? The phrase sounded like something from a business school textbook, not a description of police corruption. Brooks smiled at my confusion. Sweetheart, you think Chan's Market was paying protection money? They were paying for municipal services, security, waste management, regulatory compliance, zoning flexibility. We're not criminals, we're entrepreneurs. They were describing a shadow government, a parallel structure that provided services the official system couldn't or wouldn't deliver. And Danny had stumbled into the middle of it with his phone camera and naive belief in justice. The beautiful part, Santos added, is that it's completely legal. Private security contracts, consulting fees, administrative services, everything properly documented and tax deductible. Then why kill Danny? I demanded. If it's all legitimate, why murder my brother? Williams's expression hardened. Because your brother wasn't content to document our business model. He was planning to go public, turn it into some kind of community organizing crusade. That would have destroyed a system that works for everyone. Everyone except the people you're supposed to protect. We protect the people who pay for protection, Martinez replied matter-of-factly. Everyone else can call 911 and wait 40 minutes for a patrol car, if they're lucky. The casual way they discussed Danny's death, like a business decision rather than murder, made my vision blur with rage. But through the anger, I was also calculating. 6 officers in the room, all armed, with Morrison blocking the only exit. Dr. Vance and Thompson were innocent civilians who'd gotten dragged into this because they tried to help me. Santos, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, what do you want? You've already won. The evidence is gone, the recording was intercepted, and your operation stays secret. Why not just walk away? Because you're still a loose end, he replied. You, Dr. Vance, and Mr. Thompson here all know too much. And loose ends have a way of becoming bigger problems later. Thompson stepped forward, his security training overriding his fear. You can't just murder 3 people in a hospital. Too many witnesses, too much scrutiny. Marcus, you sweet, naive man, Brooks said with mock sympathy. Do you have any idea how many people die in hospitals every day? Natural causes, medical complications, tragic accidents during patient transport? Dr. Vance's grip on my hand tightened. The other staff know I'm here. When I don't return to my rounds. Dr. Patricia Vance left her shift early due to a family emergency, Morrison interrupted, reading from his phone. Official hospital records show she signed out at 11:43 p.m. Funny how computer systems can be updated retroactively. They thought of everything. Hospital records, communication intercepts, alibis for missing staff. This wasn't a desperate improvisation, it was a carefully orchestrated operation that had probably been planned from the moment I'd first contacted Internal Affairs. One last question, I said, stalling for time while my mind raced through increasingly desperate options. Lieutenant Torres, how long has she been working for you? Santos checked his watch, clearly eager to finish what they'd started. Rebecca Torres has been a valuable asset since your brother's unfortunate accident. Grief-stricken prosecutor seeking justice for her dead brother? She knew exactly which buttons to push to keep you motivated. The final betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Rebecca Torres, the woman who'd held my hand while I cried about Danny's death, who'd promised me justice and sworn she'd protect my cover, she'd been feeding information to his killers for 3 years. Time's up, Santos announced, raising his weapon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been educational, but we have a schedule to keep. The sound of Santos cocking his weapon was unnaturally loud in the sterile hospital room. But just as he took aim, Thompson did something unexpected. He threw the recording device directly at the overhead light fixture. The device shattered in a shower of sparks and broken plastic, plunging us back into semi-darkness. In the confusion, Dr. Vance yanked me sideways off the bed, sending my four-stand crashing into Martinez. Fire exit, she screamed, pointing toward a door I hadn't noticed behind the medical equipment. Staff only. Thompson tackled Morrison while Brooks cursed and fumbled for his flashlight. But Santos kept his cool, tracking our movement through the chaos with professional precision. Enough games, he snarled, firing a shot that splintered the doorframe inches from Dr. Vance's head. We froze. The gunshot would bring security, but Santos didn't seem concerned about noise anymore. His patience had finally run out. Back against the wall, all 3 of you, Williams ordered, his own weapon now drawn. Hands visible. As we complied, I noticed something that made my heart race, Dr. Vance was subtly positioning herself near the fire alarm pull station. Her earlier emergency button had brought the corrupted hospital security, but a fire alarm would trigger citywide emergency response protocols. You know what's funny? Santos said, approaching us with the casual confidence of a man who'd eliminated problems before. Your brother said almost the exact same thing before he died. What do you want? Like there was some negotiation to be had. Danny never hurt anyone, I said, trying to keep his attention while Dr. Vance inched closer to the alarm. Danny was going to hurt a lot of people, Williams replied. The store owners who depended on our protection services. The honest cops who supplemented their income through our consulting contracts. The community leaders who used our network to solve problems the regular system couldn't handle. Brooks nodded earnestly. Your brother was going to destroy dozens of families over some misguided principle about government transparency. We couldn't let that happen. They genuinely believed their own justifications. In their minds, murdering Danny hadn't been about covering up corruption, it had been about protecting their entrepreneurial vision of privatized policing. Speaking of family, Martinez said with a cruel smile, how do you think your parents are going to handle losing both their children? Must be devastating, outliving your kids like that. The threat was clear. After they killed me, my parents would be next if they asked too many questions. Just like Danny's girlfriend Maria, who died in a car accident 6 months after his funeral. Just like Mr. Park's mysterious heart attack. Actually, Santos said, checking his phone, we might not need to wait that long. Our friends at the nursing home say your father's been having chest pains lately. Stress can be a real killer for men his age. White-hot rage flooded through me. They were threatening my 72-year-old father, who'd never recovered from Danny's death and now spent his days in a care facility, broken by grief and confusion. You touch him and You'll what? Santos laughed. Prosecute us? File a complaint with Internal Affairs? Face it, Sarah, your entire world is built on systems we control. But his gloating was interrupted by a sound that made all 6 officers freeze, the distinctive wail of fire alarms throughout the entire hospital. Dr. Vance had managed to pull the alarm without anyone noticing. Within seconds, the sprinkler system activated, dousing us all in cold water while emergency lighting strobed overhead. Fire department response time is 4 minutes, she shouted over the alarm. FDNY doesn't take orders from dirty cops. Santos wiped water from his eyes, his expression murderous. You just killed yourself, lady. All of you. But I could see the calculation in his eyes. Fire department, paramedics, possibly news crews, too many witnesses for a clean disposal. They'd have to improvise, and improvisation led to mistakes. Williams was already moving toward the door. We abort. Clean this up later. No, Santos said firmly. We finish this now. Make it look like they died in the fire. Santos grabbed a metal medical cart and wedged it against the fire exit Dr. Vance had pointed toward, trapping us in the room. The sprinklers continued dousing everything in cold water while alarms blared overhead, but instead of retreating, he was doubling down. Brooks, Martinez, get downstairs and redirect the fire department to the east wing. Tell them you're investigating reports of an electrical fire near the pharmacy, Santos ordered, water streaming down his face. Williams, you and Morrison start a real fire in the supply closet. Something big enough to justify casualties. My blood ran cold as I realized their plan. They weren't just going to shoot us, they were going to burn down half the hospital to cover their tracks. How many innocent patients and staff would die to keep their secrets buried? Ray, this is insane, Morrison protested, backing toward the door. We're talking about murdering dozens of people. We're talking about protecting our operation, Santos snapped back. The 47th precinct generates $12 million annually in private security contracts. You want to throw that away to save a few strangers? $12 million. The scope of their corruption was staggering. This wasn't just about kickbacks from convenience stores. They were running a shadow police force that served paying customers while abandoning everyone else. Williams was already moving toward the hallway, but he paused at my bedside. Sarah, you could have had a nice, quiet career prosecuting drug dealers and car thieves. Why did you have to go digging into Danny's death? Because he was my brother, I said simply. And because someone had to. Family loyalty. I respect that. He almost sounded sincere. For what it's worth, Danny died quick. We made sure of that. The casual cruelty of his words, meant as some kind of twisted comfort, made me want to scream. But through the rage, I noticed something that gave me hope. Thompson was slowly working his way along the wall toward the medical equipment panel. Dr. Vance saw it too. You know what's interesting about hospital fire suppression systems, she said loudly, trying to cover Thompson's movement. They're designed to contain fires, not spread them. Automatic barriers, chemical suppressants, oxygen displacement. Shut up, Martinez ordered, but Dr. Vance kept talking. The supply closet you're planning to torch? It's equipped with a halon gas system. One spark and the entire floor gets flooded with fire retardant. Makes it really hard to breathe. Santos's eyes narrowed. You're lying. Am I? Check the building schematics. Or better yet, ask Morrison. Hospital security should know about fire suppression systems, right, Jim? Morrison's face went pale. She's not wrong. The newer wings have automated containment protocols. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw genuine uncertainty in Santos's expression. Their plan to burn the hospital depended on being able to control and direct the fire. If Dr. Vance was right about the suppression systems, they might end up suffocating themselves in the process. There's another problem, Thompson called out from across the room, his hand now resting on what looked like a master control panel. Hospital generators have independent fuel supplies. Even if you cut main power again, emergency systems will keep running for 18 hours. Fire department will have plenty of time to investigate every room. Williams cursed under his breath. Santos, we need to abort. Too many variables. But Santos was too far gone, too invested in eliminating the threat we represented. No witnesses, he repeated like a mantra. No loose ends. He raised his weapon toward Dr. Vance, and I knew our time was up. The fire alarms, the sprinklers, the suppression systems, none of it mattered if he put bullets in our heads right now. That's when Thompson hit the emergency lockdown switch. Steel barriers began descending from the ceiling, designed to contain fires and prevent their spread between hospital sections. Santos spun around in shock as the room started sealing itself off from the rest of the building. What the hell? The nearest barrier caught Williams in the shoulder, knocking him backward into the hallway. Brooks and Martinez, who'd been heading for the stairs, found themselves cut off as another barrier slammed down across the corridor. We were trapped, but so was Santos. The steel barriers had created an unintended consequence. Santos was trapped in the room with us, but he was also separated from his backup. Through the reinforced glass panel in the nearest barrier, I could see Williams pounding on the steel, his mouth moving in what were probably very creative curses. "You clever bastard," Santos said, turning to face Thompson with something that might have been admiration. "Emergency containment protocol. Seals off sections during hazardous incidents. Designed to save lives," Thompson replied, though his voice was shaky. "Never thought I'd use it to trap a dirty cop." The sprinklers continued their steady downpour, and the fire alarms made conversation difficult, but Santos seemed oddly calm for someone whose plan had just imploded. He checked his weapon, then his phone, water dripping from both. "Interesting development," he said, almost conversational now. "But you've just locked yourselves in a cage with me. These barriers don't open until fire department gives the all clear, which could be hours." Dr. Vance pressed herself against the far wall, medical equipment providing minimal cover. "The fire department will cut through those barriers the moment they realize people are trapped." "Will they?" "Because my radio call about the electrical fire in the East Wing should be routing them away from this section. Standard protocol, secure the area with no reported casualties first, then work toward potential fire sources." My heart sank. Even with the barriers trapping him, Santos still had angles to play. The 47th Precinct's corruption was so systemic that he could manipulate emergency response protocols in real time. Besides, he continued, settling against the wall like he had all the time in the world, "This gives us a chance for that heart-to-heart conversation I've been wanting. Sarah, tell me about the safety deposit box at First National. Box 1247, wasn't it?" I said nothing, but Santos smiled anyway. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me the real location of your evidence, plus any passwords or access codes I need. In exchange, I'll make sure your parents live long enough to die of natural causes. And if I don't? Then in about 6 hours, when these barriers finally open, they'll find 3 bodies and a tragic story about a disturbed security guard who snapped under pressure." Santos gestured toward Thompson. "Marcus here has been showing signs of psychological stress lately, haven't you, Marcus? Money troubles, marital problems, drinking on the job." Thompson's face went white. "That's not true. I've never." "Amazing how personnel files can be updated retroactively," Santos interrupted. "Disciplinary actions, failed evaluations, complaints from colleagues about erratic behavior. By tomorrow morning, Marcus Thompson will look like a textbook case of workplace violence waiting to happen." The casual way he described framing Thompson for our murders was somehow more chilling than the original death threats. This wasn't passionate violence, it was bureaucratic efficiency applied to elimination of problems. Through the glass barrier, I could see Williams talking urgently into his radio, probably coordinating with the rest of their crew. Brooks and Martinez were nowhere to be seen, likely following Santos's orders to misdirect the fire department. "Time's running out, Sarah," Santos said, checking his waterproof watch. "Fire department response time might be 4 minutes, but they'll spend at least 20 minutes assessing the fake electrical fire before they even think about checking this wing. That's plenty of time for you to make the smart choice." Dr. Vance caught my eye and nodded almost imperceptibly toward the medical cart Santos had used to block the fire exit. In the chaos and sprinkler spray, he hadn't noticed that the cart had shifted slightly when the barriers came down. The exit might still be accessible. But reaching it would mean crossing 15 feet of open space while Santos had a clear shot at all of us. And even if we made it through the exit, Williams and his crew would be waiting in the stairwells. "You know what the really beautiful part is?" Santos said, apparently enjoying his captive audience. "Even if someone finds your evidence tomorrow, it won't matter. Lieutenant Torres will testify that you were unstable, obsessed with conspiracy theories about your brother's accidental death. A prosecutor who couldn't accept that sometimes bad things just happen." The mention of Torres sent fresh rage coursing through me. 3 years of believing she cared about justice for Danny, when she'd actually been working for his killers the entire time. "Rebecca Torres is going to burn with the rest of you," I said quietly. Santos laughed. "Rebecca Torres is going to retire with full pension and a commendation for her years of dedicated service. She might even get promoted to deputy chief when Webb steps down next year." The sprinklers had turned the floor slick, and I could see Santos getting overconfident, his weapon lowered slightly as he savored what he thought was his inevitable victory. That's when I made my move. "You're right about one thing, Santos," I said, slowly reaching toward the hospital bed's control panel. "Rebecca Torres did feed you information for 3 years. But what she didn't tell you is that I never trusted her completely." His eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means every meeting I had with Torres was recorded. Every piece of evidence I showed her, every conversation about Danny's death, all of it backed up to servers she doesn't know about." I smiled as realization dawned on his face. "Torres wasn't just your inside source. She was mine." "You're lying." "Box 1247 at First National? That was bait, Ray. The real evidence is in 17 different locations across 3 states, with dead man switches that activate if I don't check in every 72 hours. I pressed the bed's emergency call button, and suddenly my voice was broadcasting through the hospital's PA system. "My name is Sarah Chen, Assistant District Attorney Badge number 4471. I am being held hostage by Detective Ray Santos of the 47th Precinct, who murdered my brother Danny Chen 3 years ago." Santos lunged toward me, but Thompson tackled him from the side, both men crashing into the medical equipment. Dr. Vance dug for Santos's dropped weapon while I continued broadcasting. "Detective Santos has confessed to running a $12 million corruption operation involving private security contracts and the systematic elimination of witnesses. Officer Craig Williams, Detective Marcus Brooks, and Security Chief James Morrison are accomplices in multiple murders." Santos threw Thompson off and scrambled for his gun, but Dr. Vance kicked it under the steel barrier where Williams was still pounding helplessly on the glass. Through the PA system, I could hear the commotion as my broadcast reached every floor of the hospital. The 47th Precinct has been operating as a shadow police force, taking money from business owners while abandoning their duty to protect the public. They killed Danny Chen because he documented their crimes. They killed Marcus Williams because he asked questions. They killed Maria Santos because she knew too much. "Shut up!" Santos screamed, blood streaming from where he'd hit the medical cart. "None of that will stick. Torres will discredit everything." Rebecca Torres is already in federal custody, I said, and watched his face go ashen. Did you really think the FBI would let a corruption operation this big continue without monitoring it? Torres has been wearing a wire for 6 months, Ray. Every conversation, every order, every confession, all recorded. The sound of power tools echoed from beyond the barriers as the fire department finally began cutting through the steel. Santos looked around desperately, a cornered animal realizing his cage was shrinking. This isn't over, he snarled. You have no idea how deep this goes. The mayor's office, the commissioner, half the city council. I know exactly how deep it goes, I interrupted as sparks flew from the barrier where firefighters were cutting through. Because for 6 months, I documented every connection, every payoff, every cover-up. Starting tomorrow, the entire network comes down. The barrier finally gave way, and federal agents poured through, not hospital security or FDNY, but FBI tactical teams in full gear. Santos raised his hand slowly, defeat finally registering in his eyes. As they cuffed him, I heard him mutter, "Your brother should have minded his own business." No, I said, watching them drag him away. He should have had a sister who was an FBI agent from the beginning, not a prosecutor who had to learn the hard way that some fights require federal jurisdiction. Danny's death had been the end of his story. But it was just the beginning of mine.